Hello guys, Eckhart Slaughter here with another episode of Star Wars Starship Versus, the series where we take two of your favorite Star Wars spaceships, put them head to head, and see which one comes out on top. I'm a little sick today, so you guys will have to excuse a bit of scratchiness in my voice. But I think even with that, today's episode is going to be a whole lot of fun because we're looking at an often requested matchup with the Millennium Falcon going against the Ghost from Star Wars Rebels. As always, I'm going to use several categories to compare these two ships: firepower, defensive capabilities, fighter support, and intangibles. And we're looking at these two ships overall, so just because one wins 2 or even 3 of the individual matchups doesn't necessarily mean that it wins overall. Also, because these matchups are focused on the ships themselves, not the people who crewed them, we're going to assume that both the Millennium Falcon and the Ghost are crewed by equally competent pilots and other persons. So I think that this matchup is going to be interesting because both of these ships are freighters upgraded heavily for use in combat and, in the Millennium Falcon's case, also smuggling. However, what I think some people don't really take into account is just how large the Ghost is. It's 43.9 meters long by 34.2 meters wide and 14.5 meters high. That gives it a total volume of over 20,000 meters cubed. On the other hand, the Millennium Falcon comes in at under 7,000 meters cubed, so this is obviously a much larger ship. And I think that kind of reflects the different roles that the two ships were used for. The Millennium Falcon was primarily used as a smuggling ship. It was meant to go fast, avoid the bad guys, and deliver cargo. On the other hand, while the Ghost was also originally a freighter, it was used more consistently and modified to be a warship. So let's keep all of this in mind as we go through the analysis. We'll start first with firepower. Both of these ships were impressively and also illegally well armed. The Millennium Falcon's main weapons were its quad turbo lasers, which could either be manned by a gunner or controlled by the pilot. If we're looking at cannon, which I think we should considering we're comparing the ship against the Ghost, we don't really see very many impressive feats of what the ship can and can't do based on its weaponry. And really, I think the most impressive thing that the Falcon has done on screen is to destroy the reactor of the Death Star. On the other hand, the Ghost had several laser turrets and a twin laser cannon on the front of its ship, and this is different than the turrets that the Millennium Falcon had. This is like a dedicated ship weapon. The ship also made use of proton torpedoes, and I think the weaponry on the Ghost was really quite effective, and it has some impressive feats when you look at Star Wars Rebels. The first comes in episode 5 of season 1 of Star Wars Rebels, and in that episode, the Ghost, with basically one salvo of its turbo lasers, destroys an Imperial freighter. Now this freighter was likely unshielded, but it's still pretty impressive. Later in the episode's Ghosts of Geonosis, the Ghost again destroys a much larger cruiser, this time in our Quinton's class Imperial cruiser, with a combination of its proton torpedoes and its lasers. Now, I just don't think the Millennium Falcon has this kind of firepower. It's never done anything quite like the Ghost has done in Star Wars Rebels. So I'm going to give the category to the Rebel ship, the Star Wars Rebels ship, that is. Alright, so let's now look at shielding, and this one is kind of hard to determine. I mean, the Ghost is a much larger ship, so we would presume that it has a more powerful shield and a stronger hull. But I do think its shielding feats, and a lot of this comes from the fact that it's part of a TV show aimed more at children, have been inconsistent at best. The Millennium Falcon, on the other hand, has shown itself to be highly durable. I mean, it's tanked full shots from Star Destroyers on several occasions. And I mean, we've seen it survive the fire of the explosion of the second Death Star, being hit by asteroids, even hitting a planet after coming out of hyperspace. So I just think the Millennium Falcon is probably a little bit of a sturdier ship, albeit only barely. So I'll give this category to the Falcon. Next, we deal with the carrying capacity of the two ships, and this one is easy because all the Millennium Falcon had was escape pods. These are obviously not very useful in battle. On the other hand, the Ghost made use of both the Phantom 1 and the Phantom 2, depending on the time period. Let's look at the Phantom 2 because it's the most recent ship. The Phantom 2 was an upgraded separatist military transport. It made use of added cannons, increased hull strength, and added maneuverability. When docked with the Ghost, it added 2 rear cannons, but of course it could also undock and do its own thing. Still, the ship isn't really very durable and is shown to be vulnerable even to small arms fire, so I'm not sure how much of an impact it would make in a battle against the Millennium Falcon. Still, better than nothing, so I'll give this category to the Ghost. Alright, finally we have intangibles, and I mentioned most of these before I really went into the categories, but I guess I just want to reinforce how different these two ships really are. I feel like the Ghost is a much heavier, much bulkier, much larger ship, Well, the Millennium Falcon is extremely fast and extremely agile. I mean, we've seen some of the things that it can do, both on Jakku, at the attack on the second Death Star, and in the asteroid field in The Empire Strikes Back. And I mean, references to the Falcon's speed are usually made in relation to how fast it can go in hyperspace, but this thing was still very fast at sublight speeds as well. I feel like I should also mention that the Falcon does, on occasion, have some pretty serious maintenance issues, and I mean, this is one of the major themes of The Empire Strikes Back. But I mean, of course, we also see this in The Force Awakens, albeit only briefly. I'm not sure how much this will actually come into play in the battle that's coming, but it's something to keep in mind. Alright, so let's look at the battle itself. And this is an interesting one because, as I've talked about, we have a very fast, albeit more lightly armed ship versus the very bulky, very powerful Ghost. And as much as the Millennium Falcon is one of my favorite ships in Star Wars history, I do think it will be overwhelmed by the Ghost. I mean, all it really has to fight with are those 2 quad laser turrets. And I mean, although they can be effective against larger ships, they're really more well suited for anti-starfighter combat. It does have concussion missiles, but we haven't really seen them in action to see how effective they would be. On the other hand, the Ghost has its powerful laser cannon and its proton torpedoes. I think the ship will have trouble hitting the Falcon, but when it does, it's probably going to shred it, at least after a few shots. It also has the Phantom II, which should help neutralize the speed advantage, albeit probably not fully. As I said, a very interesting matchup. I think the Millennium Falcon could pretty easily get away if it wanted to, but actually destroying the Ghost, I think, is a whole nother question, especially where it's pretty lightly armed. So I'm going to give this battle to the Ghost, but I'm only going to give it to it 6.5 times out of 10. I mean, maybe I'm downplaying how much of a difference the Falcon's speed would be, maybe I'm downplaying how strong the Falcon's shield and hulls are, I don't know. But I do think that the Ghost will come up on top more times than it wouldn't. Anyways guys, I'm going to put a poll at the end of this video. Let me know which ship you think would win, and I'll announce the results at the beginning of next week's video. Also, let me know what you thought of my analysis, the video in general, and of course, let me know which matchups you want to see next. And if you see a matchup in the comments that you like, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment saying that you like it. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, may the Force be with you.